Good. Thank you. When Elise, Ted, Jack were analyzing the information, they realized that there was a gap in some of the knowledge that we'd like to have that would probably be best provided by the staff liaisons that are serving on the boards and commissions. And so we've decided that we would like to interview those staff liaisons. We think at the most it's probably 10 because there's a lot of overlap on those staff liaisons. And we want to just do a real short question and answer period with them. Hopefully, didn't we decide that hopefully it'll be face to face? I believe is what we're hoping would how it would work out. So in keeping with that, yes, Elise.
I'm not totally recalling, but I think when it had been mentioned before, we were thinking that it could be done through like just an open-ended type survey thing.
Okay.
Instead of interview.
All right. Okay.
Up for discussion.
Okay. Dee, did you have a question? You're on mute.
Thank you. I just wanted to know the purpose of interviewing the staff liaisons. What type of information are you trying to glean? Is it demographic? Is it staff perception, participation? What is that? What question? I guess what answer are you looking for? What information? Thanks.
Well, you can kind of tell from the questions that we have where we're trying to go with that. And hold on, I'm turning to those questions, of which I thought I printed. Hold on. So Dee, some of those questions simply, what board did you staff, in what capacity, but how did you perceive the board functioning? What would have made it more efficient, that sort of thing. So basically their perception of how the board functioned from their perspective, which we know is probably going to be different from a volunteer's perspective on how that, I've lost my screen. Hold on a second, guys. Lovely. But basically how they perceive the board's functioned. And we felt that it would just add another layer of richness to the data. And again, to match it up with how the volunteers felt also, and see if there is a correlation or not a correlation. And then again, what does that mean if they're two different perspectives? I don't know where it'll take us. It depends on how far, I guess, how divergent they are, but to go from that. Ted, what about you?
Yeah, I'd just like to add to that, and also their perceptions on what their own interaction is with the board, and what issues there might be in terms of the amount of time that they're spending on staffing the board. Do they consider that valuable, et cetera? And also some further insight into the board's relationship with city council, because that seemed to be one of the primary issues that were identified in the respondent survey. Was sort of the issue of are the boards being listened to basically by city council? And so, I think staff can provide some insight into that is going to be unique.
Nina, you had a comment?
Yes, I have two concerns. The first is that since there are a limited number of people who are serving as staff liaison, how comfortable are they going to be being candid? And what can we do to reassure them and anonymize their responses? And in fact, is it even possible for them to actually be anonymous in this? I think we will get better answers if people feel protected. So that's that. And one thing that I noticed that's not here is anything about how this, in the questions that I just looked at, whether there's anything that talks about how their liaison role affects or does not affect their other duties, and what kind of supervisory experience they're having in their capacity as liaisons. Because it's not just the relationship of the boards to the city council that matters, but it's also the relationship of the board to city staff and of the staff liaisons to the rest of their staff colleagues and supervisors that's going to contribute to the quality of their experience in this particular role. And again, candid answers are probably going to depend on the degree of anonymity that we can offer to them.
Well, first off, I think that questions 5A and B kind of go to what their perception is of their specific working on the board. You know, did it take too much time? Was it a good use of your time? Did you feel like there was a better staff person to do it? Someone who may have been more closely related to the content or the purpose of the working of that particular board.
Right. But that doesn't get to the question of how serving as a board liaison affects the rest of their job function as a city staff member. Are they getting the support they need from the staff hierarchy in order to do the best possible job? Are they able to set aside the right amount of time for their staff purposes? All that sort of thing. When they get evaluated for their job performance, how is their contribution and role as staff liaison part of that process? Those things will also tell us how.
Hold on one second, Nina. Patrick, are we able to go back in the recording and pick up these actual statements, or should we be writing them down? We can pick it up.
It's in the recording, and I am keeping minutes as we go.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yep.
Okay, so Nina, yeah, I get it.
I think that a supportive city staff apparatus is as important a consideration as the efficiency of the boards and their interactions with council directly.
Right. Elise, give me a minute and I'll let you talk. One, I think in talking with Ben Woody, Ben and Sarah are very interested and very committed to what we're doing and wanting to know how this is all going to play out. I do think that we would be able to assure staff members of their anonymity, that people would not, that would be a high ranking thing that we would want to be sure is to protect the staff people and what they're saying. But also, on the other hand, I do not see this, even if they were to speak ill of their experience, I don't know that there would not be blowback, because Ben knows that this system isn't working right. And there are some issues with how with what kind of time staff does have. I will tell you, most of this whole process has come out of the fact that staff has said, we don't have enough time to do this. That staff, being the liaison to some of these councils, is taking a tremendous amount of our day of work, along with all of our other responsibilities. So I know this is one of the reasons why council is trying to narrow down some of these, reduce the number of councils and boards that we have, because staff doesn't have enough time to give the time that they should have to do it appropriately, or efficiently and effectively is probably better. So Elise and then Alan.
I was just going to share some of the things that you had said that I feel like, while I understand that anonymity can sometimes elicit a more candid response, that there is a history here of staff being interested in this, and I would hope that they would be candid, and as well as it's not just an opportunity for them to point out negatives with the boards that they've staffed. It's an opportunity for them to highlight this is something that worked well, which then could maybe be applied to other groups.
Mm-hmm. Alan?
I just want to issue a kind of a general comment about the staff issue, which has been around for some time. We've heard this as far back as probably over a year ago in reports from the city that they don't have enough time to fulfill the need to liaison with the boards. I don't think that's a board issue. That's a city issue, and the city needs to add more staff. They seem to be adding staff in many other areas. Why can't they add staff time to work with the boards? That shouldn't be the board's problem. That's a city problem, not the board's. So I just want to throw that out to the group for discussion.
Okay, Nina, are you going to address Alan's comments, or are you going to bring up a new comment? Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I think, I mean, yes, Alan, I agree. It's not the board's problems, but if our goal is to make recommendations for better functioning commissions, then understanding what the impediments are with staff and whether there's an internal staff structural issue that is making it more difficult for them to be able to serve their roles, or if we have recommendations about staffing levels and so forth, I think that's within our purview to address.
I agree.
Ted?
Yeah, we also want to elicit from them any suggestions that they may have in terms of, how staffing can be done more efficiently and effectively, and so that we can, because and we're going to a certain extent be feeding back those ideas, or at least those ideas that we think are good ideas, back to the city in the form of our recommendations.
Mm-hmm. Right. Dee, you've worked with a lot of different boards and stuff, and I know you're driving. Can you unmute yourself? Are you able to weigh in on some of this? How do you think staff will feel?
I think the staff is going to feel like they don't want to be in the middle. This is what I've heard from them anyway. And I'm going to be very frank with you. A lot of them have already weighed in with city council. And that's the reason, as you said, why we're being assembled, or they want to reduce these boards and commissions, because the staff is absolutely almost demanding that this boards and commission stuff is way out of hand as far as their workflow and all of that. And this comes from the staff. This comes from most of the staff, I would say, that in the city manager's office. Not that that matters, but they're some of the main ones where they get all the feedback. That's what I've gotten. And a lot of them I don't think are going to participate because they don't want to be in the middle of this. They've told city council, and council has acted upon that. So that's all I've got to say. And I got that directly from the staff that is responsible for the workflow. That's it.
Well, I was watching one of your reparations meetings the other day, and I think I counted 6 staff people in that meeting. Now, granted, reparations is an anomaly, It is a huge group of volunteers, and it has an impact on every department in the city. But am I right in about 6 or 7 staff people?
There are, but basically the clerks don't come. The staff people, the only staff people that attend are the city manager, the city and county attorneys. The assistant managers will come upon request and provide data. Some department heads do show up, but as a general rule of thumb, the people that clerk that the city attorneys pretty much, they record it. And then, like, just for instance, when we have something that they think they're going to get sued for, they will send a memo out to us quite quickly. But the rest of the staff does not. That inundation basically comes from the boards and the commissions. Now, I don't know about the city manager and how they shake down. I do know that the Office of Diversity and Inclusion is the direct project manager. Brenda Mills is usually that person specifically, and none of the other staff that are under her. But they've got, before the Reparations Commission even was assembled or appointed, they were inundated already. And that's another reason why they are not assigned. We have people who do take minutes, but it's not them. They're paid, some of these people are. And that was to stop the staff from coming in. As y'all know, there's several $1 million in that reparations budget. And some of that is paid out to the facilitator, who then hires people or makes arrangements for the minutes to be taken. That's a long answer, but that's what it is. But they don't participate at all. Not the staff that records. They absolutely do not.
For y'all who have served on boards and commissions, how many staff people did you have? Oh, okay. I thought that was us being live on the city YouTube. No. Raise your hand about the numbers of how many people or staff you would have on your boards and at your boards and commission. 3, 2, and 3, 4, 1. I had 1. Wow. That is a lot, isn't it? I mean,
Mountain Community Capital Fund, and pardon me for butting in, when I was on that board, we would have anywhere from Nikki Reed to Frank, who's the finance director, to a clerk in Nikki's office, to the county people who would be there. And I think they had 2 or 3 staffs.
Okay. All right. Well, your meeting has started, Dee, so goodbye.
Goodbye, you guys. I'm sorry to interject that, but thank you so much. I'm getting ready to go in. Thanks.
Thank you, Dee. Alan, what you got?
Just a quick comment. I agree with Dee that staff may feel that they're pressed to support the boards and commissions, and they may be overworked. But I don't think that's an appropriate reason to reduce the boards and commissions if they're performing an important role. That shouldn't be their issue. That's a city issue. So that's the only comment I wanted to make.
Patrick?
Yeah, and I just wanted to say that I I agree with what Alan just said. I do think that, this whole process started with some feedback from staff to
Mhm.
reduce the workload, reduce the number of boards. But I think that, the feedback we've received from staff so far that you've reported, Stacy, I do think that there are a number of staff that really do want this system to work better. And I think this survey of staff could help us identify what the pain points are, how it can be made more efficient, and make recommendations from the mindset that this structure is important, and we just need to make sure it operates effectively.
Mhm. Well, I think that's the operative word, is effectively. Helen, you said you had 6 Parks and Rec people at a meeting for which committee was that?
The Parks and Recreation Advisory Board.
Wow.
At every meeting, we had at least that many people.
And who were they?
Roderick would come, Debbie Ivester would come, there'd be a girl there taking the minutes, and then there would be all the program directors. They would sit in the audience, and Pete Walls, the money guy, they would all be there. I can't remember her name, D something.
I know who you mean.
I can't remember their names.
And were they, I'm curious, because all of y'all say there's more than one person there. Were they there in case you needed them for their expert input? Or were they there because they were invited to be there because of what you were going to talk about and you needed them to respond to stuff? Or were they there just because their boss told them they had to be there and listen to what y'all had to say?
That part, I don't know. They were just always there. And we only met every second month. We only met 6 times a year.
Elise, what about your committee, your board you were on?
The neighborhood advisory committee has 3 staff people that attend. They 2 of them have very similar, related stuff. I think they work a lot in parallel. And then on the multimodal transportation commission, there's also several staff people there. One person's running the tech. Several people are just there to pipe in, I guess, if needed. The liaison themselves is there. There's staff who might be coming in to give a particular presentation, but of course that's a necessity. But a lot, from my perspective, personally, what I observe is that it seems to be a lot of duplication of knowledge sets for maybe one question to come up when, someone could maybe take those notes, reach out to that person for the needed information, and then get back to the group.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like these are exactly the types of questions that I hope we can ask staff in this, and that they would be candid about, the value of their time spent in these meetings.
Mm-hmm. Well, have y'all had a chance to look over these questions that were presented prior to the meeting, or do we need to read them out loud so you know what they are? I don't know what the thumbs up mean. Read or you've read? Read them now? Oh boy. Oh, Patrick has put up the document. Thank you, Patrick. So I'm just going to go through them quickly in case, so we can get a sense. And then based on our previous conversations, we'll pick up on some of these nuances that y'all have talked about. But we want to try to keep these questions no more than 10 questions to these folks, or else they're not going to respond. And if we can get less than that, that would be even better, but no more than 10, because we do want them to fill them out. So we've got, of course, which board are you on? What capacity did you serve? How long have you been on that? How long have you been serving as staff to that board? And as Jack, these were yours, right? Questions, I think. Weren't these Jack's questions? And he's made a comment that we may already know the answers to those three questions anyway, that we might be able to pre-fill
I
or
think
something.
they were Ted. Sorry to interrupt.
Oh,
but I think
sorry,
they were
Ted, I
No,
apologize.
it was not me.
Yeah, and so we might be able to pre-populate that. Then how did you perceive the board functioning? What did they do particularly well, or what needed an improvement, or what was the hindrance to the board's efficiency and effectiveness? Taking into consideration your other duties, does staffing this board take too much of your time? And if yes, how could the board be more efficient? How could the board make your time more efficient? How could they be better served by a different staff member? Perhaps that particular staff person wasn't the right one. Or does the board require more staff support? Taking into consideration the needs of the board and the effectiveness of that board, how valuable do you consider your time was spent staffing the board? And elaborate if possible. Does the board make actionable recommendations? If they do, how are they evaluated and implemented? And if they didn't make recommendations, what would contribute to the board achieving that objective? And what interactions did that board have with City Council? What interactions did that board have with City Council? How did that interaction, how effective was it, and did it move any of their initiatives forward? And what ways are there to get better communication between board and City Council? Then along with some of the questions that Nina proposed earlier with regard to staff and how they felt about that role in their job description. It would be interesting. I'm not saying that this should be a question though, but it would be interesting if it's in the job description. You know, if you're hired for a program director for the Parks and Rec, is it in the job description that says you will attend a 5:00 meeting every other month for Parks and Rec Advisory Council that could take anywhere from 2 to 4 hours, depending on what the discussion is? It could, are they prepared for that before they even take the job? It would be interesting to know. Having worked a lot with Parks and Rec, I know that there are some of those meetings do require a lot, particularly if you're getting ready for a festival, only because the festival cuts across a lot of different departments and you've got to get everybody's approval. Alan, what you got? You're muted.
Quick question to the survey committee. Were you aware, Elise and Jack and Ted, of any boards or commissions that had direct interactions with City Council other than the annual reports, quarterly reports, or how often the boards did that, did their reporting? But I'm talking about direct communications with council, because I'm looking at question number 10 about the interactions with council, and I'm wondering, beyond just the reporting, generally, which is in a written format, what other interactions did the boards have? Elise or Ted or Jack?
Ted has his hand up. Elise, you want him to speak first? Okay, Ted, go for it.
Okay. I don't think there were many, if any, boards that had direct communication with City Council. I think it was mostly through the either through the council liaison or through the staff liaison that the communication was achieved. But one of the notable findings analyzing the data was that there was significantly more satisfaction among board members if they perceived that there was communication with City Council beyond simply the annual report. That simply producing a report seemed to not be very satisfying, not be seen as not being very effective. So I think there was, you know, the desire for more engaged, communication with city council, and you know, even if it was through intermediaries.
Well, Ted, does that mean that by them saying that all they had was the annual report, am I making an assumption that they're saying that they had no initiatives or, just for the lack of a better term, any initiatives that they wanted to initiate? Sorry, guys. Things that they wanted to do that they didn't get done, and for whatever reason they didn't. So all they had was an annual report, which is, if you're trying to get something new going, you don't just throw it into an annual report. I know I'm not being clear.
That's sort of speculation. I don't think there was any the data that could answer that.
Because I think one of the things that came out in that first, very, 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 very first meeting that we all had was that council and staff felt that some of these boards, commissions, and committees had run their course, that there was, you know, they weren't doing anything, and there was no new stuff for them to be doing, therefore they needed to be disbanded. I think that has come up in some of the conversations also. And if all they're doing is doing an annual report every year that says we met 9 times this year and here's what we talked about, and we didn't initiate anything new or exciting or ameliorate any problems that this board had, that the issues that this board is constituted to deal with, we didn't do anything about any of those things, then, you know, that's something that needs to be dealt with too. Jack, what insight do you have?
Yeah, well, you know, of course, where I spent all of my time was with the open comments, and it's you know, what struck me most is when they brought up staff in responding to some of the questions, and of course, none of the questions were tell us about the staff. It was always in their response to some other issue they would bring up staff, and I would have to say that my continuing sense is, and I could look at this, but I would imagine it's at least a plurality, if not a majority, of the comments that were made were very positive with respect to staff. The things that come to mind are things like, you know, this board would have accomplished nothing without the staff. And sometimes they would name names and say, you know, so-and-so was instrumental in us accomplishing anything.
Mm-hmm.
They would occasionally mention the council liaison as well, but not as often. So from the board members who responded, from their perspective, it seems like the staff is highly valued. There were recommendations, I remember, from at one point someone saying it would be great if we had a dedicated staff person who always came to our meetings, because I got the sense from that answer that, well, maybe it's not always the same person.
Mm-hmm.
So the lack of continuity could be an issue.
Yeah.
But by and large, I felt like these board members really value the staff. And I'm not sure if they're open with those staff members about those opinions. If the staff members are in turn going to council and saying, there's way too many, we got to cut some of these out.
Mm-hmm.
That's hard to reconcile. One thing I've made myself myself a note here, though. Like I said, I only was reading about staff commentary if the comment brought up the issue of staff within a given question.
Mhm.
What I haven't looked at is across all the questions, what's the preponderance of commentary with respect to staff, regardless of what question, what issue prompted the open comment. And I will do that. I'll try and send folks some notes on that in the next few days.
That would be fantastic. I don't know if all of y'all have read through this report that we've got in draft, but the way that this team of 3 have cross-referenced and evaluated this data is remarkable. I mean, and city staff that I've been talking with are blown away also by the level of professionalism and detail that has been put into this. Yes, Patrick, yes. So you know, it's very, very rich, and it tells us a lot. And our biggest problem, if you want to call it that, is getting it into some bite-sized pieces that people can really chew on and get the flavor of it and then do something with that. Elise, do you have any other insights into how we could handle some of these staff questions?
Well, first I wanted to answer one of your questions from earlier. You were asking if there were any boards where it seemed like they were doing a lot of direct communication with city council.
Mhm.
So I did just do a little filter for those people that did respond. Board members directly contact city council. I got a list of the boards that those people were on, and there's a smattering, maybe 2 here from the same board, but there are 5 from Urban Forestry Commission that report direct communication with city council.
Alan, is that the committee that Sharon is on? Aren't you on that one too? No, just Sharon? Okay.
They are a very active
Yes.
committee, and they, had the open space amendment
Mhm.
that I think they actually opposed as a group, or maybe there were individuals that opposed it.
Mhm.
But I imagine that's kind of what they were referring to.
Mhm. Mhm.
So I wanted to answer that question from earlier. As far as what you're asking regarding staff questions, there were some discussion has come up around like mission and goals. And so something I had shared earlier or suggested was maybe including a question or 2 about how the staff person felt that did the board have a mission and goals that were clearly aligned with council priorities?
Yeah, that and these boards and commissions are crossing over different councils all the time, and that's an ever changing, ever shifting situation. And when you have things like the pandemic, everybody's priorities changed, and I think that is a constantly moving target, but that staff needs to manage it so that the county, the committee, the board, or the commission stays vital and relevant.
I feel like the staff serves this really important link between council priorities and the board's individual goals that they've set. If those are out of alignment, it's like there's going to be no positive that comes out of the recommendations.
Jack? There you
Yeah,
are.
the other thing I'm wondering is, we got that note a couple of weeks ago about the modification that they've made on which boards, quote, report to which council committee, where a number of the boards have been grouped under specific council committees. I wonder if we should try to explore, even in this short window available, whether that has helped any with respect to going back to staff members. Does that help the staff members or not? Or should it?
But even if we were to be able to get these interviews with the staff liaisons within the next 6 weeks, that would only have been in place, what, a month?
Couple of months, yeah.
We can certainly throw it out there and see. Patrick?
Yeah, I was just going to suggest we could ask if staff feel that that modification is going to address some of their concerns, even if it hasn't been implemented for long.
Anything else that you, Alan?
Yeah, just a general question. This boards and commissions mission, aren't these mission statements generally set up by the city council, by the charge that's given to them in their original charter? And if there's any lack of clarity on what their mission is, I would fault the board for not having looked at their original charter and the charge that was given to them by the city of Asheville, by the council, and not staff, but by the city when they set up the board or commission. So I just wanted to raise that issue. That needs some clarification.
Right, I agree with you. I think that sometimes folks join a particular group thinking that XYZ was going to be what they were going to do, only to find out that that's not in the charge at all, and that that's not even on their radar screen. I have seen that happen at times. And I don't know where the fault lies with that. If it's the volunteer who's one of the people, like we've talked about in the early days, of that they join a committee because they have a one issue problem. Somebody's trying to build an asphalt plant next door to my house. I'm going to get on the committee or commission or board that's going to stop that. Or, people who, or is it staff that's not keeping them true to the charge that city council gave them, or the chair that's not keeping them within their lane. I think it could fall in several different places. And again, going back, that we've talked about too, with the training of the chairperson, the skill level of the staff liaison, and their communication between each other. How in sync are the two of them? Elise?
Regarding these different boards and some people joining them, not realizing what the mission is, something that I have come to kind of get out of the data that's been analyzed is that, or something that came up is that those people who are on boards or commissions with unclear missions tend to have less satisfaction with their service. And so one of the kind of recommendations that, as we're getting to the point that we're making recommendations from this group, one that I would like to propose is a systematic review of all of the missions of each board, because in some cases those boards may have been chartered so long ago, the issues are different. Maybe their mission needs to be updated to better reflect the current status, or in some cases they're just sort of unclear, like with the neighborhood advisory committee. it says that we're supposed to advise city council on neighborhoods, not if we are, trying to be advocates for neighborhoods. It kind of just seems like a liaison type role. And so I know serving on that board, I feel like that's one where the chartering document could be reviewed and maybe updated.
Alan?
As we've all acknowledged, the constituents on city council changes from years to years. And if, for example, let me take NAC, which I believe a couple of the people today, I believe Elise, you're part of NAC, and I don't know who else, Helen might be, but that was set up in 2012, and I was on the original, one of the original members of NAC back then for 3 years. My question is, should the alignment of the mission change based on the membership of council, or should it be reviewed with the current membership of council? Because if council changes, their views may not be in line with the original mission statement that was given as part of the charge to the board or commission. So that could be a concern. Now, Lisa, I don't know if you want to comment on that.
I do agree with what you're saying, and certainly we wouldn't want to put this into a situation where, we're just temporarily amending these, and hopefully ideally, it could be done in a way where they would still be flexible, but have a scope, a broader mission, as opposed to like direct goals that would be acted on. That's kind of my idea of it, but I completely understand what you're saying.
And I do think that one of the roles of these board commissions and committees is to make sure that that every 2 years, the focus of what we're trying to do for the betterment of our community isn't constantly changing, because we all know that some of these things cannot be fixed in 2 years or 18 months, really, because it takes you a few months to get started. And so it's supposed to overarch the constantly changing political bodies so that there is some constancy and consistency in dealing with some of our community issues. So yes, but I do think that I could talk about downtown, and some of y'all know my sister was the former director of downtown development. And when she was doing all that work, there wasn't a council meeting that you didn't have that they weren't talking about some issue about downtown. Now they talk about issues, and we went to the council retreat, and they're talking about crime and all this kind of stuff, but they never mentioned the word downtown. And finally, Leslie said to Esther, what are y'all doing about downtown? You keep saying you've got this Fox News story that is circulating every other night, that is the exact same story every other night about how bad the crime is. We're not responding to that in our own communications and media outlets. And yet this is where supposedly the crime is. What is the answer? What are y'all going to do? And finally, then Chief Zach came the next day and addressed some of that. And then blam, 30 days later, and I'm not saying that there's a correlation between what Leslie said to Esther and 30 days later with this new initiative with the Buncombe County sheriffs and getting the firefighters back out on the street, also in uniform. But, you've got to make concerted effort to be sure that we are all in sync, that all these commissions, boards, and all are working with council, and simply because it's not an immediate council priority, or the fact that those council members, none of them campaigned on these particular issues, that they still recognize that the issues that those boards, commissions, and committees are working on are important and are still needed and do need to move forward and are valued for what they're trying to make changes about. And I think that maybe that might be something that we're missing, that there is not a conscious effort from boards, commissions, and committees to council to be sure that if we bring something to you, are you going to listen? And if it's a viable fix, are you going to do something about it? And, you know, I don't know. I think the urban forestry is a good example. If you've got 5 or 6 people who are talking directly to council, they've done some good work. They've made some great changes. They've made certain things happen. So it could be that this is something that we need to, again, go back to the training with the chairs and the people who are serving and the staff liaisons about how best to affect change in our community. Alan?
Just an observation. If a board or commission is not looked upon by council as being relevant, and they're still operating under let's say a charge that's 8 or 10 years old, and council's changed several times since then, perhaps one of the reasons why council feels some boards aren't relevant is because they're still operating under an older charge, and maybe that needs to be updated. I don't know. But then again, do you need to update the board or commission's charge every time the constituents on council changes? I don't think so. So, you know, those are
I would hope not.
two conflicting issues.
Mm-hmm. Helen, you have a comment?
Yes, on our board, there were many issues that we never saw to fruition because the council person would change and the budget would change. And so we were
Is this on Parks and Recreation?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
We were put onto different smaller committees, different projects that were put forward, and then they would just fizzle out because I was on there for 6 years. So they would fizzle out because a council directive had changed, the finances had changed, the budget had changed, and they would just completely fizzle out. So it does reflect whatever council is making as their priorities. And after they've done their annual meeting and said what their priorities are, then everything would change within our board and our whole direction would change.
Are you still on that advisory?
No, after the pandemic, we never got going again, and there was no appetite within the people that were serving on there to even regenerate it.
I was just wondering with the change with Roderick not being there anymore, with the new director, if things have changed.
I understand they've changed significantly, but we don't meet as a board anymore. But I understand he's a very present director, and he's very good. So, so perhaps it would be different now. But at the time, there is no board now. There is no Parks and Rec board now.
Okay. And did that? So you said that was after the pandemic. Was that a decision of Roderick's, or how did that come about?
No, there was no decision. It just didn't reconvene. And we never met via Zoom. So once we did our last meeting, and Debbie Ivester, who was the person who really spearheaded everything, and she did all the work, and that's who you'd meet with when I was chair. That's who you would meet with to decide what was going to go on the agenda. She retired, and it literally fizzled out. And we had so many people that rotated on and off that we had no continuity with the board. Or very little continuity with the board.
Interesting. Okay. All right. Mina?
Yeah, I wanted to bring up some thoughts about this issue about continuity and a larger arc to community issues. It seems to me that this is something that we might consider formulating recommendations around, which is to say that when a particular committee or board is commissioned to do something, that there be a time frame assigned to that. So that, because as Helen says, council does a budget every year. Their priorities are reordered every year along with the budget. And if that is not explicit, and if it doesn't have an immediate trickle-down effect to the boards and commissions, then there needs to be some mechanism by which commissions can maintain the arc of the trajectory that they're on in accordance with how they were first charged. Now, that means some kind of explicit time schedule associated with each committee and each issue facing each committee, so that people have a sense for how large the scope is, how long they're going to be able to work on this issue, and what the expectation is for deliverables or actionable recommendations or whatever. And that requires a degree of formality, which it's not clear to me has been present with every board or commission. And it also means that council could be more structured and more deliberate about how it manages these entities in a way that provides predictability in terms of what is expected of them and what it is expected that council will do with their recommendations.
I'm going to ask a real geeky question. So I know every one of y'all has some special project or issue of your heart about the city and the county or whatever. How many of you, when the new budget comes out, goes into that budget to check to see how that issue is being funded? Okay. All right. We're okay. And if you see that the funding has, okay, Helen says she does too. So if you see that the funding has dropped, or we had one issue one time where it wasn't even in there, do you raise a stink about it? Do you go to council members and say, what the hell are you doing? Don't you know what's going to happen if you don't pay for this continuing maintenance or something? Uh-oh, did I get paused because I said the H-E-L-L word? Okay, Nina, yes, ma'am.
Well, the time, as you all undoubtedly know, the time to be paying attention to those funding issues is not after the budget is voted on. It's during the working sessions when the budget is created. Yes. And it's not just being in touch with council, because the lion's share of the work on budgets happens at the staff level. And, you know, if you want to make sure that you're
No. Okay, Nina has frozen up. Elise, you had a comment, and we'll get back to Nina.
Well, one of the things I was going to say specifically addressed something that she was commenting on. Just, and now Nina's back. Nina should continue.
I'm sorry, I saw that you'd all frozen up and I wasn't sure where I was in my diatribe on this subject.
You were just saying that you've got to go to staff before the budget's approved.
That's right. You've got to get it up in front of staff. You've got to get your views in front of staff. And then you need to lobby individual council members to make sure that they care as well. Waiting until anything has been voted on is way too late.
Right. And so, Elise, what were you going to say?
A couple of things. As we're talking, I'm kind of just like picking up little bits, and I'm like, oh, maybe we could develop this into a recommendation later. And so just a few things that I was hearing were perhaps to make a more clear avenue or clear path for boards to make budget requests. Maybe something that's a little more publicly facing or something like that. Some way to allow boards to bring their issues more publicly instead of just oh, well, you got to read the annual report to find out what this board is trying to get council to do.
Good point.
So that was something that I was just kind of picking up on, as well as a lot of discussion about how projects can either live or die by rotation of staff.
Yes.
You know, as well as who's on council and whether or not they support that kind of activity. But, you know, it could die with staff if they just, you know, retire or move or something. And I know that came up with Neighborhood Advisory Committee before with the Neighborhood Volunteers of the Year. I think it took like 2 years to actually get that together because the application process to whatever staff had that left and didn't pass it on or something like that. So that's also something where, you know, I don't have a suggested recommendation right now, but it seems like something regarding continuity of staff might be in the works. And just the last thing I wanted to say to address something Nina had said earlier, talking about having very clear, like objectives and timelines and that kind of stuff. What that started to sound like to me was the original proposal that staff was making with like working groups to tackle individual issues. That's what it was reminding me of.
Yeah, that's true. Breaking it up into those little smaller increments. And then once that issue's taken care of, they're gone, you know, that they're disbanded, so to speak. Nina doesn't agree with you.
I'm happy to hear more, you know, that's just how it was sounding to me.
So Nina, go ahead.
I think what's needed is a dialogue. It's not a matter of just council saying to these boards and commissions, you will work on X, Y, and Z, because these boards are also meant to represent a grassroots up voice. And so they can't just dictate you shall only care about these issues. There has to be some back and forth where voices from the community say, yeah, we're on this board and commission because we really think that this is an issue that needs attention. But I think it's important that there are expectations, both of the people who are serving on the board and on council, about the time, about the horizon of these issues. Is this a 5-year issue? Is this a generational issue? Is it a 1-year budget related issue? Is it a short term, we need to get somebody out to fix this pronto issue? And those are all a question of scale and timeline. And obviously these things are going to change and fluctuate over time. But as committees are doing their work and as council is charging them and also listening to them, it would be so helpful if there was an agreed upon timescale for each of the goals or concerns that these groups are intended to address.
Jack, hold on one second. Jay, we haven't heard from you. Is there anything you want to say? Feel like you need to weigh in?
Thanks, Stacy. No, I'm just happy to follow along. Appreciate it.
Okay. All righty. Just wanted to be sure. Jack, what you got?
I tend to agree with Nina on her latest comments, and the word that really triggered me was when she said what's needed is a dialogue. I have observed, and I'm not on any of these boards or commissions, so I'm really an outsider looking in. But what I have observed in the exposure I've had sitting in on meetings and things is the word transparency is being used, it seems, pretty rigidly. in terms of insisting that all conversations be recorded and that minutes be taken. That does not promote dialogue. Dialogue needs to be able to occur on phone calls or, the stereotypical water cooler conversation. But, I know that even if all of everything were to be happening in person, the volunteers that sit on these boards don't necessarily, they're not necessarily in the same place where they can have a dialogue by the water cooler with council members or even staff. But somehow, that word dialogue keeps ringing around in my head. If we can find a way to make recommendations around promotion of dialogue, be it in person or other ways, that doesn't necessarily require a recording and minutes that we get published. Sometimes you just got to talk about stuff in order to figure out what your thinking is, and that's not happening. My sense is that if it is, it's rare.
True. I do think that the water cooler conversations, because we don't meet in person anymore, or parking lot conversations after a meeting or before a meeting or whatever, they do help to promote a sense of belonging, a sense of togetherness, and hopefully, that we are of one. You can build your coalition, so to speak. Ted, and then Jay.
Yeah, I was just going to say that, what Jack is suggesting really has to be informal, because there's something called the Public Meetings Act, which, which is, I think, primarily responsible for, all meetings being recorded, et cetera, that, there's, if you get more than a quorum of, or if you get anything, anything from a quorum up, in a conversation, even if it's an informal, even if it's an email conversation, that falls under the Public Meetings Act, and it has to be in a public venue. So yeah, there are workarounds, but those workarounds really can't be institutionalized, because then you're circumventing the Public Meetings Act.
Yeah, but for instance, I don't know that Patrick, correct me if I'm wrong here. Can't people in the neighborhoods group get together and just talk about issues? It's not like it's city council. I mean, you're saying, Helen's saying no.
This applies
were
to
told-
city
were told
council.
Wait, one person.
Yeah, we were told you weren't allowed to meet more than 3 people at a time. So we could never sit together and talk about anything. And occasionally, would happen, but we were told that you couldn't really do that. We tried to have meetings with new members that came on to try to get them involved and active and to read documents and to be together. So we could, the chair and I could meet with one person to get them on board. We couldn't, if 2 new people came on, we couldn't do it with 2 people. We had to do 2 separate meetings. And I was
Or you could just,
before that.
or you could just send out a public notice saying that you were having this meeting.
That's correct. Yeah. And then you can invite the public and then it's open and then you're okay.
Okay. Jay, you had a comment.
Yeah, it was before this very good point about the public meetings requirements, but Jack's point makes me curious, and I don't know if it rises to the point of being included in the survey, but I'm curious how staff liaisons make themselves available to their to these boards, and like, do they have an open invitation? Oh, email me anytime, or is it just they kind of know that people have their email address, but they don't really invite the calls or the emails? Is there a standard that is the expectation, or does everyone kind of do it on their own, according to their own preference?
Okay. Patrick, Ted, and
Yeah.
Okay, Patrick, go for it.
And first, I did want to suggest to Jay and anyone else, if you have a possible question, please feel free to add it directly to our survey doc so we can, capture everything and then we can narrow it down to a final list. I just wanted to comment on, the balance between discussion and transparency and the strict requirements. In my experience, I found that staff do typically direct boards to operate in a more rigid format, even beyond what the law allows. So you will see, our city council members will discuss things more informally. But when it's presented to boards, things are, I've been on boards where they say you can't have a Google Doc because that's a shared channel where everyone's communicating. I tend to feel that the law does have requirements that are there for a reason. It's beneficial for the work of a board for everyone to know what discussions are occurring, what information is being shared. But there are certainly allowances for people to have informal discussions as long as you stay under a quorum of the greater group or a subcommittee. So I think perhaps I think we could explore that topic of how we might be able to provide guidelines that are both in alignment with the law, but encourage more open dialogue between members. I mean, I just feel that boards are actually somewhat limited even beyond what the law requires, that you can't have an email thread with everyone, you can't have a Google Doc. Well, maybe there's ways we could use some of those tools effectively, and those are things that we could include in our recommendations.
Okay. Ted?
Yeah, I was just going to respond to what you were saying, that the Public Meetings Act, it only applies to creatures of the city, which, city council, the boards and commissions that the city has set up. Neighbors can get together and discuss, even, like board members can get together with neighbors and discuss, just not a quorum of the board meeting with neighbors to discuss.
Mm-hmm. Right. The School of Government just put out a document on public meetings. I'll try to put it into the Google Docs as soon as I find it. Jay? Did you have a comment?
Yeah, sorry. I was curious if the concern with Google Docs and email threads with boards is that they don't have a shared infrastructure for record keeping in the way that you would within City Hall. Is that what the issue is? People using personal accounts?
My understanding is that the concern is that it creates a shared space where everyone is communicating at the same time. So does that in itself create a meeting? You could argue that it does. And I would argue that you can satisfy the open meetings concerns by making that document publicly accessible.
Right, that's what I was wondering. Okay.
Okay. Well, getting back to, okay, Lise, go ahead.
So again, here's just a point or a moment where I'm going to say we could maybe form this into a recommendation, is for the city to clarify or investigate what forms of communication are open for board members that don't violate those the Open Meetings Act, and to make it consistent across all boards that these are the forms that you're allowed to use that are legal.
Mhm.
I don't know, just trying to distill some of this conversation.
Right. And again, this all is going back to what kind of training are these members of the boards and commissions receiving that gives them the confidence to move forward in what they're trying to do. So let's kind of wrap up where we're headed with all of this. We've got some good comments in our meeting today. Even starting to, we've already started with some recommendations that we've got a pot over here that we keep dropping recommendations into, and eventually we'll take them all out and try to make some sense of them as far as the data goes. But just ideas that kind of are popcorning in our heads over the past several months. We will look, the group will look at these questions that we have. We might work at trying to reduce, see if we can get more information into one question or try to double dip on some of these questions. And I'll talk to Ben about, now that I have a sense of where we might want to go with these, and about the fact that we definitely want to ensure anonymity, et cetera, and that there would be no blowback to any of these liaisons, to see how he feels about that. And then we'll go from there. Any other input, Patrick?
Yeah, Stacy, I just wanted to suggest, maybe could we put a time on when people should weigh in with possible questions? I'm just wondering, is there a way we can move this towards getting a final set of questions?
Sure. Since we had two people tonight who couldn't be here but were very interested in what we're doing, if we could get a list posted, when do you think you can distill the information out of these notes and add to this list that we already have, Patrick?
Yeah, I'll say, some of the suggestions have already been added, but I could do that, by
Okay.
Wednesday. I could make sure that everything that we've discussed tonight, if it was a suggested question, is on that list.
Okay, well, why don't we put a message out tonight to the big group that they will be posted by Friday, and that we want any of their input by the 26th. So we'll have it up there on the 19th, and then they can respond by the 26th, and we'll move forward from there.
Yeah, well, the document is already available to everyone, so we could just share it and say, provide feedback on it. We're going to kind of finalize input on the 26th. Is that what you're saying?
Right, but I was just thinking about the information that we've had tonight. I didn't want to push. I want them to be able to see that too. I don't want them to be saying some of the same stuff we've already said.
Okay. Yeah.
No. So let them know that we'll have something up on the site by the 19th. If they could comment by the 26th, and then we'll start moving forward from there. And I'll get in touch with Ben. Anything else, you guys? Thank you once again for a very fascinating meeting, and all of your input. Your perspectives are so on point, and it's always a learning experience. So thank you again. And if you have any other questions or comments, feel free to post them on our in this document, or ideas that you have. Go ahead and post them up there so we can start moving forward. Anything else? Alan, you have anything for the good? Patrick?
I'll just note that our next meeting will be the third Monday in June, which I believe will be the 19th.
It is the 19th. Okay, on Juneteenth. Okay. All righty, guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.